welcome to Real Estate Live's first week of events in 2021. Real Estate Live UK is a week-long programme of events brought to you by White Label and our partners. We will be hosting 3 weeks of events this year, the 2nd in June and the 3rd in October, promoting the strengths and opportunities of places across the UK. The programme seeks to keep property and regeneration sector updated and engaged, and we will have a fantastic programme of events planned this week to just do that. You can view more details on the sessions taking place this week on our website, realestatelive.co.uk, and I'll let you know about other sessions taking place today at the end of the session. Before we begin, we'll be launching a short poll on what will be the most positive factor, what will be the most significant trend for regeneration professionals in 2021. While you're doing that and taking a few minutes to answer, I will just remind you that you can use the Q&A function to ask the panel any questions, and you can find that at the taskbar at the bottom of your screen. And I'm going to just hand over to our chair for this session, Max Farrell. Thanks, Max, over to you.
Thank you very much, Julie, and good morning, everybody. Thanks for coming along to this session today about sustainable town centres and what they look like, or what they will look like. This is a really interesting and timely event, and it's a major issue which is affecting town centres throughout the country, which are at the very heart of our communities. High streets have to now adapt to the impact of things like online shopping and problems that have really been exacerbated by the pandemic with all the retail brands that have gone out of business. So high streets have to reinvent themselves, and they still have a vital role to play, but it's no longer, I think everyone accepts, it's no longer about just about shopping and a monocultural offer. More flexible working will mean people spending more time locally, more visits to town centres, and the need for flexible workspace. So people not commuting into the centre, but also wanting to leave their front door. So outer London and regional town centres, they could well have a renaissance, and that needs positive visions for the future and also collaboration. And it's great to have all the key players in that process here with us today. Unfortunately, the original chair was Sherry Dobbin of Future City, can't join us, but I thought I'd mention that she's otherwise engaged today now, but she wanted me to say, and I think it's important to talk about their approach, partnership approach, because that's what we're going to see here today, which is about the 5 C's, as Future City call it, which is the civic, commercial, community, consumer, and cultural. And I think that somebody will put a link to that in the chat. But also, as my name is Max Farrell, and I'm the founder of the London Collective, and we're a group of built environment experts. We wrote a paper last year about town centres post-coronavirus, and we talked about principles like embracing trends, being local and distinctive, but most importantly, leading collaboratively. And today is a microcosm of that. So we have a developer, we have the business improvement district, we have a local councillor, and we have the MP. So it's a fantastic opportunity to hear from them. But most importantly, I think, is that Orpington will probably be the first town centre to be regenerated post-COVID in terms of how advanced they are with the process. So there's public consultation going on at the moment, which we'll hear more about, and a planning application to be submitted this year. So my guests today on the panel are Sharon Baldwin, who is the Executive Director for Orpington First Bid and has an 18-year career working in town centre management and business development. And we also have Councillor Peter Morgan, who is the portfolio holder for renewal, recreation and housing, including responsibility for the local economy. We have Gareth Bacon, who was elected MP for Orpington in 2019. Before that, he was on the London Assembly for 12 years. And Rob Tincknell, who was best known for leading Battersea Power Station for 10 years, now of ARELI Real Estate, who are behind the town centre into regeneration in Orpington, but also Maidenhead, Brentford and other town centres. So we'll turn to Sharon first, and if I may, and the question I was going to put to Sharon is that make it better is your commitment as a business improvement district, Sharon. Can you tell us about Orpington? What changes has it seen over the last year? What are the opportunities for future growth post-COVID? And what are BID's roles in ensuring that town centres remain sustainable?
Good morning, Max. Thank you for that introduction. Firstly, for those who don't know where Orpington is, and I'd be surprised if anybody doesn't, it's on the BBC weather map. We are a major town centre, one of 32 in the London plan, and we sit on the very borough boundary of Bromley, and our hashtag is really the London Kent Gateway. We are well positioned to access London in only 18 minutes. So we look north into one of the best cities in the world, if not the greatest. But we're also on the doorstep of the Garden of England of Kent. So we're very much that interlink between the sort of rural and the urban. And we are very well connected in all transport, really, particularly north to south. As a community, we are very close. We have a very strong business community as well as resident community. We were established as the first BID in the borough 8 years ago, and I think that came and was born out of the fact that the business community was well engaged at that time and wanted to take up the opportunity that a business development improvement district would give them. We are a linear high street with a shopping centre at the heart of the town. We have about 350 businesses that are our levy payers, who we are obviously responsible for and speak for. The town, like any other, has gone through a transition period. I think every high street, every town centre is constantly going through transition, and you just get periodically an acceleration of that change. COVID-19 has accelerated beyond everyone's thoughts as to how we've had to adapt and be flexible. But changes have been happening for a long time. And in Orpington, about 8 years ago, we had an out-of-town development less than a mile away from the high street. And that probably was the start of some of the more significant changes in terms of the business makeup. Marks and Spencer's relocated, and alongside them, we then had Next and Debenhams and some of the more well-known national chains actually locate within that out-of-town area. So it left Orpington not retail-led, as many of our town centres are, which was very challenging, but it's also probably given us a period of opportunity to rethink how the town centre works when it's not dominated by retail. We have a very strong service sector, and luckily that has been able to continue during COVID. Many of those businesses actually taking on more clients and more work. We have a large hospitality sector, a very dominant hospitality, and that's obviously been one of the areas that has been impacted most significantly during COVID. But those who are agile, those who have been very flexible and have been able to respond, have actually been able to hold their own, as it were. None of them are, making the types of profits that we would like them to make, but they have shown that with adapting, they can actually cover a new, perhaps, customer as well. And not only can they take themselves through this very difficult and challenging period, but perhaps have new strengths as they go forward into the reopening. We have a re-emergence and strength in independence, as some of the bigger names are no longer there. We've had an opportunity to actually embrace independence and to support them in their growth. And we have a large financial sector, including, luckily, all of the major banks. So throughout this period, we've actually been quite a busy town in that people have been accessing those essential goods and services. What we are finding, as with everybody, is there is an opportunity that comes out of the challenge. And although we are very conscious not to underestimate the huge impact that this experience has had on our businesses and on our economy, we can also see now, particularly with yesterday's announcement of the roadmap out of this, that it's also an opportunity for us to re-emerge using all the strengths and the skills and the commitments that we have within the town. And the timing of this is positive, I suppose is what I'm trying to say, in that we will emerge with a recovery plan that's already being developed and a collaborative approach. Bids by their very nature have to be collaborative. We don't have authority, we don't have ownership. What we have is a passion and a commitment to the towns in which we work, and an opportunity to help to support and connect and to act as the enabler for people and businesses. So that's the role that we have played throughout the COVID-19 experience, the one that we played prior to the pandemic and the one that we hope to be able to accelerate and to promote post that. What we're finding is that as things are changing, it's also been an opportunity for residents and businesses to perhaps reflect upon their own circumstances, whether the business model that they have is the one that they want to continue to have, whether our residents' jobs, whether they've lost their jobs, need to find new ones, whether they need to perhaps just reevaluate their life choices, their life and leisure balances. There's a host of changes that are going on, and we need to be able to respond to that and to work with the huge changes that people are facing. We're lucky enough to have a further education college right in the centre of town. And as we look forward to the need for people to upskill and to change the way that they operate, we have that function which we hope will be incorporated into the way that the town goes forward. As a bid, we've been very conscious that in order to be better for business, which is our strap line, we need to be better for everybody. If we have a strong and sustainable social and environmental policy, it will naturally lead to the results of a stronger economic sustainability. And that's something that we brought into the work that we do very early on in the establishment of the bid, to recognise the importance of using other people's skills, other people's experience to build a really strong group. We have always tried to encourage our residents to work with us. We have a programme for the community, and we have a programme to support different interventions, which, working closely with our board of directors that come from all aspects of the town centre, has enabled us to actually create a really strong programme across all of the themes, including investment, environment, customers, etc. That's my introduction.
Thank you, Max.
So no time is tight.
That's excellent. Thank you. And of course, we can then invite people to ask questions, and please do so by using the Q&A function to put those questions to Sharon and the other speakers, and we'll open that up afterwards. But next, I wanted to turn to Rob Tincknell of ARELI. And my question for you, Rob, is in terms of ARELI's scheme for Orpington, is how will that address these challenges that we've just heard Sharon talking about, that many town centres are facing, and how will it help ensure the sustainability of Orpington's future? I suppose building upon their pride of place that the current residents have, but also in terms of future generations. So I suppose the second part of that question is around the environmental sustainability, and Orpington has a target of zero carbon by 2029, and it'd be good to hear about the role of the town centre regeneration in sort of achieving those targets.
Yeah, thanks, Max, and good morning, everybody. We set up ARELI to specifically look at the challenge of urban regeneration in our town centres, because looking in and looking at the social changes that were occurring, internet shopping, all the other things that we know well, how are we going to address this with the demand for town centres dropping enormously? And I felt that there was very much three things. First is place. It's got to be great placemaking, good mix, a proper mix of uses. And this is exactly what we're doing in Orpington. Getting people back into the town centre, places where they want to live, great public realm where they want to socialise and meet their friends, and a great mix of uses that will function both weekday, weekend, morning, noon, and night. And getting that mix is absolutely crucial. And sometimes some parts of that mix won't particularly be economically sustainable, and other bits will be very sustainable. And that's why the mix is important, because some parts will support the more weaker parts, like, for example, retail. We've got a whole new concept for retail in town centres. You can't lose that. But how are you going to plan for that when the changes are happening so fast? So our model in our other schemes like Maidenhead is to slightly reduce the size of the retail accommodation overall, but dramatically increase the number of units. So bringing those unit sizes down, making them much more fitted out, and then offering them on extraordinarily flexible terms. And we're taking the approach that the economic success of the retail will be born through the fact that people are going to use it and be there, and you create an offer that works, rather than have an economic success model based upon the length of lease and the covenants and other parts. So that's that. So we're being extraordinarily flexible about the retail offer, and we can do that because we have the other uses in the scheme to support it. But overall, it's about place, it's about people, getting people back into the hearts of these towns. I mean, it seems ridiculous that in our scheme in Maidenhead, for example, we've got a 5-acre building occupying the whole of the town centre, single-storey building that shuts at 7 o'clock at night. I mean, no wonder these towns are struggling. And that is so common across the country, and the same here in Orpington. And the third key part is partnership. These schemes, when they're in town centres, do not work without solid partnerships. That's with the local authority, it's with organisations like Sharon and the BID, but most importantly, it's with the community. And we put a huge amount of effort into understanding, working with the community, what are their trigger points, what are they looking for, what are their dreams, their aspirations, and we try really hard to bring them on the journey and make sure that our schemes are community, are very fit for the community that they serve.
Thanks, Rob. I know you're right in the midst of it in terms of the current consultation that's going on, and it'd be good to hear a bit more about that potentially later on. But I might turn now to Councillor Peter Morgan. So, Councillor Morgan, if you were able to give us your thoughts on the future of high streets and what the local authority's vision is for the future of Orpington, and I suppose how you'll be working with the stakeholders like Rob and Sharon and others in order to make sure that the town centre remains a vibrant place, but also it has the sort of best of the village and the benefits also of being part of Greater London. So over to you, Councillor Morgan.
Thank you, Max, and good morning, everybody. Of course, the local authority is passionately interested in all our town centres. We have lots in Bromley as a borough, but here today we're talking mainly about Orpington. And the town centre is always the heart of a town. Whenever I go to a strange place, I always go to the town centre. I think everyone's the same. That's where you find out what the town is about. You don't go into the suburbs and the streets, you go into the town centre. What is there? That gives it its character, its identity. So really very, very important. Let's just go back a little bit. Where were we pre-lockdown? Because that has exacerbated problems, but I don't think it's the cause. Of course, we had the online shopping growing. Prior to that, we had high streets throughout the country full of multiples, often the same. And the complaint we often had was, all town centres are the same facade, same shops, selling the same things. And people were bored with it. And they wanted the smaller private interesting traders, although, of course, they patronised those major shops, which made them successful. So then the multiples suddenly discovered online shopping, and their shop sales started to decline. And before the lockdown, the major multiples were saying, I only want to have a bricks and mortar presence in the top 50 centres in the country. If you're not in the top 50, bad luck, mate, I'm closing my shop. That, of course, takes time because they have leases, but that was the approach. And I think that the lockdown and the growth, therefore, in online shopping has only exacerbated that. And I'm sure it's going to continue because I think people have found during the lockdown that online shopping is actually very convenient, lots of choice. It isn't about price, it's about choice and convenience. So that's going to continue. So we're going to find in so many shopping centres up and down the country that there are going to be very few multiple fashion retailers at any rate. So that's going to be the challenge for all of us. And what Rob is saying is exactly my view, that this is going to be an opportunity for smaller, private, independent traders, often artisans who might be doing something at the back of the shop and selling at the front. And so those are going to be the new future, I feel. This is only crystal ball gazing. We don't know for sure. Things change. That's the only certainty in life. As a local authority, what can we do? Well, there's a great talk, of course, about all the zero carbon stuff, and we are committed to that. We have a target in the borough of zero carbon by 2029, not very far away. So the kind of things that are going to make a difference, the building regulations now demand that buildings are carbon neutral. We're going to have more and more electric points for car charging. We're going to make cycling easier, safer, places to put your bike when you get there. All those things are going to be so important on that front. But that isn't what's going to make a town centre successful. You still got to have a reason for getting there, however you do get there. So within the town centre, we and the bid and everybody else have got to try to make the place pleasant, safe, clean. That's very important. I don't want my pavements covered with chewing gum, for goodness sake. Small things, but so important. And they've got to be pleasant places, as Rob was saying. The public realm has got to be nice and interesting. There might be entertainment and culture. I'm not sure people actually come into a town centre to hear somebody busking on the pavement, but we have got cinemas in Orpington, very, very important for the evening economy, lots of restaurants. And I think a lot of people come into a town centre for somewhere to go, particularly anybody that's sort of past about 40 isn't going to be playing sport too much. They're going to want to do something else. A mother and her daughter is often the prime shopping group in any town, any shopping centre. They want to come into the town centre, be safe, be pleasant, have a nice time, go to a nice coffee shop, have a little lunch, maybe go to a beauty parlour. There's all the things that they can do in the town centre. And it's up to us as a local authority to make sure that the place is pleasant and to cooperate with all our partners to make that happen.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Peter. And I'll turn now to Gareth Bacon, the MP for Orpington. Gareth, we're reading all the time now that people are moving out of central London and to areas that are more affordable, have more green space and a better quality of life, if you like. So as MP for Orpington, how are you working with the stakeholders to support businesses and communities in the town centre? And what do you think is the most important factor now for retaining Orpington's character, but also delivering a sort of town centre fit for the future and for new residents? That would be interesting to know from your perspective.
Okay, well, thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me to this. When I was first elected to Parliament in 2019, December 2019, I had a lot of ideas about what I wanted my first year to look like. And I think it's fair to say that nowhere on my list was being in lockdown or other restrictions for 11 of the 14 months that have passed since then. So the pandemic has obviously limited my face-to-face contact with businesses and other stakeholders throughout this year. So most of my current business engagement in the town centre goes through Sharon and Orpington first, although individual businesses have been contacted me if they need help with getting grants and other support, etc. In terms of the town centre development, I think it's probably important to set out what I think Orpington is and what it is not. And put simply, what it is not is central London. It doesn't have a large amount of high density housing or a multitude of public transport options. Everything is smaller and more spread out. What it is a suburb that sits just within the Greater London boundary, but also in the county of Kent. And it has much more that closely aligns it with historic Kentish links than the designation it was given as a part of Greater London in the local government reorganisation of the mid-1960s. Much of Orpington has little in common, in fact, with central London. 2/3 of Orpington is green, which is a tremendous pulling point. There are more houses and fewer flats. Public transport options are more limited. Schools are generally good. Crime is generally low. And the population is not generally transient. People raise their families here, and there is a larger number of older people here too. A central London focused one-size-fits-all approach to planning and regeneration, therefore, will not work here. Knocking down family housing and replacing it with high-density blocks of flats would be totally inappropriate and would destroy Orpington's character. So any regeneration must cater for the needs of those who already live here, as well as, and this is the trick, those who we wish to attract. cars, for example, are of much greater importance in the suburbs than they are in central London. While transport links into central London are actually pretty good, people here are just as likely to head out into Kent as they are to go into central London, and public transport links going in that direction are far from good. And as vehicle manufacture modernises, cars are going to become cleaner and greener. And with the government committing itself to bringing in an end to fossil fuel driven cars by 2030, electric cars are likely to be the dominant theme in the very near future. So a central London inspired anti-car approach to regeneration will build in long-term problems. And I think a recognition of local need will be an important part of any decision making. Now, that said, there is an undeniable housing shortage across much of the country and the southeast in particular, and the development of new housing needs to be a priority. And I think it's inevitable from a practical and viability perspective that large-scale regeneration projects will have to largely be housing-led, but it can't be housing alone. It's critically important that the right housing is built in the right place and accompanied with the right infrastructure. It's very important, for example, that a mix of housing, retail, leisure, and essential infrastructure such as broadband is provided. In the case of Orpington, if we're to protect the wider character of the area, then the focus will need to be on the town centre. I think the town centre can cope with greater housing densification, but it needs to be done in a sustainable way that respects the surrounding neighbourhood. The retail, commercial and leisure provision in the town centre will also be crucial to its future. Now, personally speaking, I quite like Orpington High Street, but I agree with those who believe the current layout doesn't make best use of its assets. For example, it's not especially porous. The route to the leisure centre, as a good example, is difficult. The town square where the market is located is largely hidden away. The retail shopping centre is also tucked away and easy to miss. The pending regeneration of the town centre is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. And from discussions I've had with Sharon and Orpington First, with the council and with Rob and ARELI, I'm liking a lot of what I'm hearing because I think it's vitally important that we get this right.
Thank you very much, Gareth. And we've had a few questions come in the Q&A, and please do put forward any more questions based on what you've heard or your thoughts and ideas about the future of town centres. But I think in the first instance, I'll put a question to the group to start the discussion. And then we'll go and ask some questions from the audience. But I suppose a starter question would be, how can we see town centre redevelopment as a positive opportunity to realise ambitions for the area? But whilst also identifying the challenges. And I think it's in a way picking up on what you were saying just then, Gareth, around this is an opportunity to address some of the things that might not work well at the moment, and particularly around things like permeability. And having looked at the master plan for Orpington, I think it is very interesting in terms of introducing residential, having a more walkability. I mean, and these are all things that we all know make successful places intuitively and also from our evidence elsewhere. But there are challenges, and I think you touched on one in terms of people's attitudes towards cars. And there's no doubt that in order to be more sustainable, we need to have and encourage different modes of travel. People are much more used to, in lockdown, actually walking and cycling and e-scootering, and the younger generation are much more used to the idea of car clubs and cars are being electrified, as we know, so e-charging points and so on. And I wonder, Rob, if you might just try and explain how you have tried to address these but challenges, both by the sort of positive aspects of the master plan, but also allaying people's fears and concerns about higher density and what that will mean for their everyday lives.
Yeah, sure. I think Gareth is bang on about the needs and the needs for this to be done in a sustainable way. And of course, environmental sustainable is absolutely crucial. And we will create a scheme that will meet all the current modern requirements, both from the market and from policy. However, I think the most important thing is actually to be socially sustainable and in some ways as well economically sustainable. Nobody wants to us to come along and build a town centre that doesn't actually do the job. And we always, these are such important schemes. Again and again with our schemes, that phrase comes on board, is said that these are once in a lifetime opportunities. And they must think way beyond the boundaries of our site, and they have to have a positive impact upon the whole area. Otherwise, they do not serve, they do not do their job. This is the bullseye of the town. It has to create the vitality and the vibrancy throughout the high street and support everything that we're doing, not just within the red line that we have. So the mix of uses is key. And the economic sustainability of that, making it work, is vital to that. And therefore, what does make it work, what will make the retail work? And therefore, that is we think by creating a sort of an ecosystem in the area that functions, getting good connections so everybody can come into the scheme from all the different parts, creating an on-site population that needs to be fed, watered, entertained, etc., and then creating good quality workspace so they don't need to get in their cars and go off and work, particularly in a post-COVID world where we might be working from home a little bit more. They've got great spaces that they can work here. They can pop to London if they need to, but they can work and live on site, creating a much less impact upon the road, a road network. So there is a balance. There's this really important balance around, and it's not around density, because density isn't just there, well, let's just have as many apartments as we possibly can. It's about creating a mix that works. And nobody wants to build these things. The last thing we've got to do is build something that just fundamentally doesn't hit the major target and create economic growth throughout the town.
Very good. Does anyone else on the panel want to respond to that? Or if not, I'll turn to some questions.
I think there's just one or two things, sorry, Max, on that it's very much in line with what everyone has said. But I think that in order to get things to work from the environmental point of view, it's having people investing in their towns. And one of the ways that we've been able to sort of pursue that with the community, both business and residents, is to involve them in the greening of the town. So we have green walls, we're silver gilt holders in Britain in Bloom. We have had lots of different projects for dementia, where we've taken school children and those suffering with dementia, and we've planted up pots and we've kind of created the community around that. We've got art installations. We have had diversity walls being created, but we've actually got children who maybe were walking past with a spray can and we're going to come back later. We've actually involved them in that process. And I think we have encouraged children to be part of our pallet park, for instance, which we did last summer, by saying, be part of it, use it, but don't abuse it. And I think if you can get people invested and actually participating in making and creating their town, then you're going to get better usage, better cohesion, and longer term, more economy out of that.
Thanks, Sharon. And that actually picks up on one of the points that was in the chat, which was about using creative placemaking and cultural activity as an agent for change, for renewal, but also helping people to rebuild their confidence in the town centre and through cultural uses. And the bid has an important part to play, doesn't it, in terms of the actual management of the space?
I think it does. When we have public-private spaces, and I'm sure my big colleagues that are listening in will recognise the challenges that sometimes gives us, because we can say that we've got public spaces and there's going to be an events programme, but who is it that's going to put on those events? How is that public space of great quality, and quality is a word that we want to hear more, how is it actually going to be paid for? Is the power supply in the right place? We're going to have far more outside dining, outside experiences, but we have British weather. So we're going to have to accommodate that kind of change in the way that people want to use their town. And it's about agreeing some of those fundamentals early on. We have outdoor cinemas, which we do. It costs a lot of money to bring those schemes in. If we had a wall that we could just put a switch on and show a film, and then you could advertise on it and get your funding that way. There's just very practical things, which if we can talk to Rob and the team at an early stage, we can make things work so much more effectively. And we can use the artists and that whole community that is really inspirational and really creative and collaborative at this early stage to make those changes. I think that's really important that we do that now.
That's very good to hear. I think what I might do now is just combine two of the questions in the Q&A, because they're both more political questions, if you like, and I'll put them to Gareth and to Peter, if I may. And the first is around the government's proposed planning reforms, planning for the future, and whether you think that will help or hinder town centre regeneration. And the second question is about the city deal model, and whether that has had any impact on sustainable town centres in your opinion. So I don't know which of you might want to take either of those first.
Well, I'll have a crack at the planning reforms. The city deal model, I'll leave to Councillor Morgan if he's amenable to that. In terms of the planning reforms, it depends very much where we end up, because at the moment all we have is a white paper, and a white paper is a description of a destination of travel, really. It's more of a consultation document than a bill, so the bill has not yet come to Parliament. There are some good bits in the white paper, and there are some bits in it that I think are more challenging. One of the good bits is it's designed to speed up the planning process. And I think that will be welcomed by many, but it's important that it's done in the right way. And one of the concerns that I had with it was that it was accompanied by a housing algorithm which assigned targets to various parts of the country and boroughs in the country, and I think they were completely unsustainable. For example, in Bromley at the moment, the target is to develop slightly more than 600 new units per year. Bromley are exceeding that. They're doing 700, which is good. This would take it up to nearly 2,500 per year every year for 10 years, which I would submit is a completely unsustainable target. The only way that you could do that whilst protecting green spaces would be to demolish family housing wholesale and replace it with blocks of flats, and I don't think that would be very helpful for anybody. That's been dropped, the planning algorithm, that's been changed. And the bit of the planning white paper that I think is good is the designation of different areas as development areas, areas to be protected, and areas where you might do some development, but it would need to be supported by the local authority. The key part of that is who makes the decision about which of those areas or what designation goes where. And I'm very keen that should be done as locally as possible, so by Bromley Council rather than, for example, by the Mayor of London. And at the moment, the indication is that it would be done as locally as possible. And I think that that's good, because then we can tailor things to the local need. And going back to the opening remarks that I made earlier on, what we don't need, particularly in Orpington's case, is a central London approach to regeneration, because if we go down that route, I think we're probably going to upset more people than we please, and we are going to build in problems for the future because it won't recognise how things are at the moment. So I think the jury is out at the moment in terms of whether the planning white paper will make things easier or better. It depends what form it emerges in terms of legislation.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Gareth.
Max, I don't mind having a little go at the planning side. Gareth's covered most of it, but the one he didn't, I think, mention too much was the change of use provisions. I think that's going to be very useful, in my opinion, for town centres. Hitherto, as you know, you had to get planning consent to change from A1 to A2 to A3, A4, A5, and so on. That's being scrapped, and I think that's a good thing. I think the market is in a far better place to decide the use of a property than any number of civil servants or local councillors. And I think that's going to help town centres to be flexible, quick on their feet, and accommodate what the market is demanding. So I think that in itself is going to help town centres to adapt in this modern world.
Thanks, Peter. There is also concern from many quarters about permitted development, in the sense that shops on high streets, for example, that might be converted to residential, that those changes might not be the best in terms of active frontages and also irreversible, changing the nature of high streets. So there are sort of delicate balances here, aren't there, in terms of where it's most appropriate for the change of use and what type of change of use.
Yeah, I think the change of use to residential is a different issue altogether. That wasn't what I was talking about, but that certainly is a danger. And I think that's really up to the local planning authority to look at their town centres, say, is my town centre too big, too small, and put a red line around it and say, right, political development rights, I have an Article 4 direction there. You cannot change from a shop whether it's A1 or A5 or anything else in between, to a house without planning consent, and then each one has to be considered on its merits. But we have to draw that red line, and there will be some towns which are essentially too big. The high street is too long, and actually it would be quite good to concentrate the shopping into a tighter area.
Good, thank you.
If I could just come in there, Max, as well. Sorry, I think it's a really big debate in terms of the actual function of the town and how people need to use their spaces, and how we all use those spaces more effectively going forward with click and collect and the fact that people no longer need stock rooms. It's about replenishing stock on a daily basis, not on a monthly basis. So some of the large units that we have, certainly in Orpington, are no longer fit for purpose. We need to look at the way that they are built. We need to make sure they're accommodating for all sorts of deliveries, for access. We need to be producing and managing the business community in the way that it serves its goods and its services to its customers. They need to be able to access those in the way that they want. And certainly the kind of physical build that we have is no longer appropriate. But we also need to be mindful of what sort of spaces people do want. And we're going to have to be very flexible. When you are paying for frontage, it's more expensive than if you have a long linear shop. That doesn't seem to work because we're sort of forcing people to go into accommodation that's affordable rather than accessible and appropriate. You can mitigate business rates by putting a cardboard box in an empty unit. That's not fit for anybody. So I think there's some really big conversations about the flexibility of space. Startup space is always something, and we've sponsored it. We've had lots of startup businesses, but it's also step up space, just moving to that next level. And being able to curate a town to actually put inside it everything that you want for your community and your businesses is the ideal. But there's obviously the market as well. And I think these conversations show that there is tensions between all of the parties in terms of what perhaps we think is the ideal. And the bonus that we have is being collective and having the conversations at the right time to ensure that we do have the appropriate build for the town centres that we've got, and that we do consider all of those things. Permitted development rights was great for big tower blocks that are no longer being used, but they're not necessarily appropriate for everything that we've got. And we just need to keep that dialogue open and as transparent as possible.
Agreed. Thanks, Sharon. That actually also partly answers a question from the audience, which was around the role that technology can play in supporting sustainable and resilient town centres. And you mentioned, or Gareth, I think, mentioned around click and collect. And then you talked about the logistical side for retailers and technology improving the efficiency of distribution and receiving and goods. But then there's the social side, isn't there? And social media is so much more important part to play in everyone's lives, and having apps for town centres to understand all sorts of different features. So I suppose the question actually came from Mark Jenkinson in the audience. If that's the Mark Jenkinson I know, then he was previously at Siemens, so it's not surprising he's asking about the technology side. But I wonder, Rob, if you might want to come in on that and talk about how, with mixed use, how technology is enabling and design is enabling all these different uses to coexist coherently.
Well, it's a great question. It's something I'm really passionate about, actually. Back in Battersea days, about 8 years ago, we had mixed-use developments along the River Thames were often referred to as soulless. And there was a real struggle to get people to communicate with one another. So we had an idea about creating a ring-fenced social network in our project to break that barriers down and get people working together and get people connecting. Now, nothing existed at the time, so we actually ended up building our own system, which has now gone off to be adopted all over the country. It's called Spike, and it does a number of things. It connects people with one another. It has clubs and forums, and there's 100 clubs now that the residents of the first phase of Battersea have set up. There's 1,000 members of the book club. There's all sorts of different things, but the app gets people, it manages their lives. It organises their parcels, their defects, and their basic communication and keys and all sorts of things like that. And these tools are absolutely essential. And there's some stunning feedback, particularly in COVID, around various schemes and how these people have connected and kept being connected with one another during the pandemic when they're all locked up in their apartments. So these new tools, as I think we've lost our way slightly, we all come out when there's a big event like the Olympics or a royal wedding and wave our flags, but as soon as it's over, we sort of shuffle back into our houses, shut the curtains and don't talk to one another again. So this is a good way of just breaking down those barriers, and they're absolutely essential to creating social sustainability.
Thanks, Rob. I will be looking up Spike. That sounds very good. I suppose we've got probably time for one more question to put to you all. And there's a question here from Gordon Seabright, which I think is a really good one. I've recently become involved in a group which is connected to the creative estuary, which is all around the whole of the Thames estuary being having culture-led regeneration, which I think is absolutely fascinating and timely. And I know that many people in Bromley have this sort of dual identity as whether it's Kent or London, but we won't get into that because we don't have time. Gordon's asked, one of the areas of continuing growth in demand for workspace is from artists and makers, people actually being more creative and independents, wanting to work more locally. Could this be an opportunity to Orpington to build a reputation as a cultural hotspot? So I don't know who might want to take that in the first instance. Maybe give me a nod.
I can answer to some degree, and that actually we have a really good artists community. And in fact, one of the oldest property in Bromley, the Priory, sits within the Grade 2 listed park in Orpington. And that has been recently converted into artist studio by an arts collective called V22. And that houses pottery, upholstery, photography, art. It's got all sorts of things in there, but it's quite hidden away. And I think that's part of the challenge that Orpington has. It has pockets of all sorts of things going on, but we haven't been able to perhaps promote it and expose it as much as possible, because a lot of the previous development, a lot of the way that the town has emerged has been ad hoc. And what this gives us an opportunity to do is to have a much more holistic approach to the way that we actually develop a town centre for the future, so that we can get all of these experiences and opportunities in the open and presented to the public more effectively, because it's certainly not without that, it's just slightly hidden. And as we look at the services and amenities around the housing and the commercial space, we need to ensure that we've got enough leisure facility, that we've got theatres and art galleries and things that can actually be flexible uses for community. We have a list of people who want to set up business in Orpington, who want to open up art studios, yoga studios, dance classes and all sorts of things. We just haven't had the physical buildings available to them at the right time. So I think this is a real opportunity to engage further with that. And one of the advantages of working closely with Rob's team and having the shopping centre manager as actually the chair of the Business Improvement District, which is a great relationship, is using the space that Rob's got in the current shopping centre more effectively over the next 18 months. And we are working with community groups and faith groups to actually utilise that space. To take the rates liability away from the shopping centre and present something to the community and to the wider audience in a much more effective way. And I think we can trial new things. If things don't work, that's fine. We haven't built the new town yet, but let's take the next 18 months to actually really see what the community we've currently got would like to participate in, and as importantly, what the new community needs to have at its doorstep.
Thank you, Sharon. That's very, very positive. And I suppose what I'd like to see now is, as we sort of wrap things up, as it were, is just ask each of you to give your thoughts about this final question, and then I'll come to each of you individually. So, town centre redevelopment will always mean there are going to be risks involved, and I think everyone accepts that, and everyone comes at it from a different perspective, whether you're public or private sector. But successful schemes understand the risks, and they also embrace collaboration. And I think what I'd like to do is sort of build on this collaborative spirit and goodwill of this event today, and ask each of you what commitment you can make to this process that will help bring confidence to residents and to businesses that Orpington can be an exemplar for other town centres. If it is the first out of the traps, as it were, the first to be a post-pandemic regeneration, taking on board all of the positives that can come out of the crisis that we've had, what commitment can you make, and what part do you think you can play in helping to make that happen? So I might just come to you in the order that we spoke originally. So Sharon, if you wanted to go first on that.
I think the role that the bid has is to, as I said earlier, we don't have the authority or the ownership, but we do have the commitment and the connections. And it's very much about us being faithful to our levy payers. That's who pays us. That's who we work for. And making sure that over the next 18 months before the build starts happening, that we are considerate to the businesses that we have now, and that we help them recover from this very turbulent period. And that the relationships that we have with them goes from strength to strength, and they're considered in any new build and new town that's emerging. But that we also make the connections, we assist and we promote all of the good work that Rob's team is doing, that the council, that the government are looking at in terms of bringing it all together. It helps to have somebody that can look at the coordination, that can pick up the phone and speak to the people on the ground, as well as those in senior positions. And we have that ability really to be an enabler for lots of things that are going on. And our commitment is to our levy payers primarily to say that we will ensure that we challenge where challenge is necessary, and we'll support where we can to make sure that they're not forgotten in this process, that the challenges that come from demolition and rebuilding, that we mitigate those concerns, and that we do all we can to make Orpington the best that Orpington can be, with a quality that we know that we are lacking at the moment, but that we need to reinstate, and that it's going to be appropriate for Orpington and appropriate for its wider community. That's my thing.
Thank you very much, Sharon. That's quite a commitment, and I think bids are inherently a sort of collaborative enterprise, aren't they? And trying to align everyone based on mutual interests, and very important part that they can play. So, Rob, what was your commitment to making sure this happens? I mean, you've got a very key role as ARELI and through the master plan.
Well, I've been very lucky in my career of getting involved in some really exciting big projects. And one thing we've always done on every scheme all the way through this journey has been to work really closely with local communities. We held a public consultation that was so exciting at Battersea Power Station that it was once referred to in Time Out as the best thing to do in London this weekend. So we love doing this, and we really do. And it's one of the most disappointing things about the last 12 months is that we were literally about to embark on our whole community planning weekends. We launched it, as Gareth and Peter will remember, and Sharon, we were all there. We launched it, and then literally about 2 weeks later, we had to can it. And then we ended up going to a virtual process in the autumn, which was okay, but not ideal. And I can't wait to get back and set up some exhibitions, get the community around some tables with some pens and paper, and start working with them. And I think this is essential with town centres, not just the collaboration with the community, but with the businesses, with the local authority, etc. These projects, simply put, do not happen properly unless you do that. It's as simple as that. You've got to be working in the spirit of partnership all the way from start to finish.
A key point. Thanks, Rob. And hopefully it won't be too long now. The plan ahead announced yesterday. So over to you then, Councillor Morgan, in terms of your commitment and the role that you can play in making this happen.
Thank you very much. Well, of course, all that I said earlier is what we plan to do. The local authorities, of course, are enablers rather than the actual promoters. Rob is the promoter in this instance. The bid are there on the ground. We are, for me, the most important thing in a local authority is not to stand in the way. So often local authorities make life difficult, too much bureaucracy, too much time approving planning or whatever it is. If we can make ourselves more amenable and more helpful, that's good news. And anything we can do, as we have in the past in Orpington particularly, spent quite a lot of money on the public realm to try and make it nice and make that compatible with the development that Rob is planning. That's going to be a very good thing. All the things I said about the zero carbon target and all the things we have to do for that are all what we have to do. But the most important thing is that we are enablers. We're here with a sympathetic ear. We want Orpington to succeed, and we are determined to do so.
Great to hear. Thank you. And Gareth, what's your commitment and role you can play?
Well, thanks, Max. The trouble with being tail end Charlie is you find yourself saying what he said or what she said. But I'll try and expand on it a little bit. Look, I've got a considerable amount of skin in the game. I mean, Orpington Town Centre is right in the heart of my constituency. I have a vested interest in making sure this once in a lifetime opportunity works properly. And partnership is the key word here. Rob used it in his remarks, and he's completely right. If you look simply at the land assembly for the regeneration, you've got at least 3 different landowners with the council, the college, and now ARELI with the town centre. And getting those to work in harmony together, I think, is really, really important. And then, of course, you've got loads of stakeholders beneath that. You've got the bid, you've got the individual businesses, and you've got the residents. So partnership working is the key thing. And as the local MP, I suppose my role is more of a facilitator than a provider, a bit like the council. My job really is to try and pull the various different interests together and push it forward in common cause. I think there is quite a lot of common cause around this, which is a tremendous start. I do feel for Rob a little bit because he's completely right. Back at the beginning of March of last year, they were just launching their stakeholder engagement program, and it was going to be, I think, going to be really, really good. And then it had to be pulled. And the online version was okay as far as it went, but it wasn't anywhere near as good as it would be if we could have people in the room. I know they're committed to doing this, and as soon as we can get out of this disastrous pandemic and get back to meeting people face to face, I think it's going to go forward with great strength.
Absolutely, second that, and we're all invited to Orpington, I imagine. So.
It's a great place to be, God's own country, as I tell everyone.
Yes, whenever you want to come down, we're here, show you around.
Good, and thank you very much, everyone. It's been a brilliant discussion and really, really interesting. Lots of insight and good takeaways. So thank you very much. And I'll hand over now to Julie, because I think you've got the results of our poll. Have you, Julie?
Yep, I'm just going to share the poll. Just to thank you to Max and thank you very much to the panel for what's a really timely and I think really important discussion. So it's been a great session. Thank you to you all. We have 2 more sessions, both taking place at 3 p.m. today. They should appear on your screen shortly. They are agriculture at Revolution at 3 p.m. And registration links will appear in the chat, or you can visit realestatelive.co.uk. I hope you can tune into one of those sessions, and we look forward to seeing you at some point during the week. Thank you very much.